I took back my house and left my mother homeless after she disowned me for not attending my sister's wedding. Hey Reddit, my mom's favorite was always clear when I was growing up. My younger sister Rachel, 37F, and I, 42F, are the children of my mother, Karen, 62F. It seemed as though I had vanished from the world the instant Rachel was born. I don't want to come across as theatrical, but this is the reality. My mother was naturally quite protective of Rachel because she was born underweight and ill. I get that it must have been frightening for her to have a sick kid, but Rachel was the only child that Karen cared for, rather than merely the family's baby. Rachel received royal treatment. Her needs, wants, and moods were the center of attention. For example, Mom would hand-feed Rachel until she was well into middle school since she disliked eating by herself. Mom would simply complete any school projects or homework for Rachel. No questions asked, Mom allowed Rachel to stay at home if she didn't feel like going to school. And then there was me. I had clothes, food, and other essentials, so I wasn't completely disregarded, but I was alone emotionally. Unless it had to do with Rachel, Mom never truly cared about me. Mom was preoccupied at a spa and forgot about a dentist appointment I had when I was around 10 years old. After hours of waiting outside the school, a family friend saw me and offered to drive me home. My mother pretended it wasn't a huge thing when I returned. "Oh, I thought you'd figure it out," she simply said. The only person who actually saw me was my father, Michael, may he rest in peace. He wasn't home as much as I would have liked because he worked so much, but when he was, he tried his best. When Karen and Rachel weren't there, Dad and I would go out for movies or ice cream. He would give me extra cash for birthdays or school outings, but he would urge me not to tell my mother. In retrospect, I believe he was attempting to compensate me for feeling so unnoticed. But Dad could not deny the favoritism no matter how hard he tried. Everything was always better for Rachel. I had to save money or work for what I desired. Rachel, however, only needed to ask, and it would materialize. I requested a bike one Christmas, and Rachel made a last-minute request for the same item. Rachel received a brand new, gleaming bike beneath the tree on Christmas morning. I received some socks. "You're older," Mom responded when I inquired why. "You can get one for yourself by saving money." However, it was more than just material possessions. Rachel's happiness was Karen's obsession. Mom would move quickly to resolve whatever small problem Rachel was having, such as a friend not texting her back or receiving a poor grade. I quickly learned not to bother going to her for anything, though, as she would tell me to stop being so dramatic, or figure it out like an adult, whenever I was upset about something. Of course Rachel took it all in. Why wouldn't she? She was living the dream since Mom took care of everything for her, so she didn't have to do anything. Rachel eventually stopped learning even the most fundamental life skills. She was incapable of managing her own schedule, cooking, or even cleaning. Rachel was totally reliant on her mother since she protected her from everything. I didn't know how toxic the dynamic was until high school. Mom would complete Rachel's schoolwork after she would sob to her about how difficult her lessons were. Mom pleaded with the principal to have Rachel's grades modified after she failed high school, accusing the teachers of failing to recognize her unique needs. Naturally, it didn't succeed, but it demonstrated the lengths Karen will go to in order to shield Rachel from responsibility of any kind. However, I was supposed to be self-sufficient. I had to work things out on my own if I had trouble in school. I had to use the money I earned from babysitting if I wanted to participate in extracurricular activities. And Karen would tell me, "You're the older sister. You need to set an example," if I ever ventured to voice my displeasure. I was eager to be out of high school by the time I graduated. I never looked back after enrolling at a college in a different city. I never made a better choice than to move away. I was able to breathe for the first time. I didn't have to compete for Karen's attention or continually compare myself to Rachel. I might simply be myself. Rachel, meanwhile, remained at home and didn't leave until she was 26 years old and married. Karen continued to be involved in her life even at that point, phoning her 5 times a day to inquire about topics like, "What did you eat?" or "How is your hubby doing?" She even unexpectedly came up to bring Rachel groceries or clean her house, even though Rachel and her husband were more than capable of handling those tasks on their own. For my part, I was going about my life. I obtained a job after graduating from college and began constructing my future. Dad kept in touch with me by giving me frequent phone calls and coming to see me when he could. Not so much Karen. She would occasionally comment on my Facebook posts or send me a birthday text, but that was about it. I honestly didn't give a damn. Her unrelenting criticism and partiality no longer burdened me, and I was joyful. In hindsight, I believe Karen's fixation on Rachel stemmed from a desire for control. She never allowed Rachel to grow up because she wanted her to always be in need of her. I had to fend for myself after being thrown out of the nest early. Although it was painful at the time, I now consider it a blessing. While Rachel became totally dependent on Karen, I learned to stand on my own 2 feet. The dynamic remained the same even after I left. Karen was Rachel's facilitator, I was the forgotten child, and Rachel was the golden child. Some things never change, which is humorous. Not funny haha, but funny in a depressing manner. But everything did 11 years ago. At first, Dad's frequent coughing didn't seem like a huge concern. He blamed it on a recalcitrant cold or allergies. However, he didn't get better as the weeks stretched into months. He actually grew worse. He was usually exhausted, breathless, and simply not himself. Nevertheless, he continued to labor because he was a selfless, industrious man who always put the needs of others before his own. Karen didn't appear to notice at all. She was too preoccupied with her daily schedule of yoga sessions, spa visits, and whatever else occupied her time. After her first marriage ended, Rachel was back at home by that point. She didn't appear to be really worried about Dad's health, and she wasn't working either. They seemed unwilling to face the inconvenience of admitting that something was amiss. I was trying to keep some distance from all the family dysfunction while establishing my career in a distant place. During our frequent phone conversations, I could sense that something wasn't right. He sounded more worn out and weaker. He dismissed my question about whether he had seen a doctor, claiming to be all right. I knew he wasn't though. When he eventually went to the hospital following an especially severe coughing spell, things reached a breaking point. A serious lung infection was the diagnosis. When I learned, I immediately dropped everything and ran home. I was appalled when I arrived. Dad was laying in bed by himself, looking so weak and ill. Rachel and Karen? They were out getting manicures. Karen pretended to be shocked to see me when they returned. She even attempted to give me a hug, but I refused. When I questioned her why she wasn't with Dad, she said that she had errands to run. Both had recently had their nails done and were carrying shopping bags, so it was clear they had just left the spa. I spent as much time as I could with Dad when he was admitted to the hospital. Every now and then, Karen would stop by, but only for a few minutes. Rachel? She said it was too hard for her to see him in that state, and she hardly turned there at all. I was balancing everything at the same time, including communicating with doctors, controlling his medicine, and attempting to make him comfortable. On most nights, I even slept in a chair by his bed. It was frustrating that Karen didn't participate. It's not like she was too busy to be there because she didn't work. However, she pretended that going to the hospital was a huge hassle. The day she stated, "He's in good hands with the nurses," will always stick in my memory. Should I just sit there, or what? Yes, Karen, supporting your husband is exactly what you're meant to do. Dad was released from the hospital after a week. We hired a nurse to assist at home because he still required round-the-clock care. Karen was expected to take charge and assume greater responsibilities, yet she continued to be untrustworthy. She would leave for hours to run errands, only to return with shopping bags, or she would fail to give him his medications on time. On one occasion, she chose to stop at the salon before picking up an oxygen tank for him. I had already made arrangements for someone else to deliver it by the time she arrived home. Rachel wasn't any better. She said she avoided Dad completely because she couldn't bear to see him in such a vulnerable state. She spent much of her time in her room watching TV or browsing on her phone. She even went on vacation with her friends during one of Dad's worst bouts, leaving me to manage everything by myself. In the end, I resigned my job to care for Dad full-time. To be honest, I didn't want to leave him alone with Karen or Rachel, and I didn't trust them to do it. He was worthy of better. In order to keep him from feeling lonely, I prepared his meals, assisted him with his physical therapy, and made sure he had company. I loved him, so even though it was exhausting, I would do it all over again if I had to. As Dad's health deteriorated, Karen did make an attempt to work harder, but it was too late. She would sit next to him, but she would be glued to her phone, either talking to Rachel or posting on social media. It seemed as though she was unable to fully focus on him. Rachel only arrived after being coerced by Karen, and even then, she would excuse herself and depart after a short while. A few months later, Dad died. The nurse, I, and a few of his friends who had come to bid him farewell were all around him. Rachel and Karen. They weren't present. Rachel was out with friends, and Karen had gone to some sort of wellness retreat. When it became apparent that Dad was running low on time, I contacted both of them, but they did not answer. The funeral went by quickly. I was tired and heartbroken, but I still had to put up with the bullshit from Rachel and Karen. As though she hadn't been ignoring all the warning signals for months, Karen talked to her friends about how unexpected Dad's death was for the majority of the funeral. Rachel made a huge show of crying, But it felt so forced. She hadn't given a damn when it counted. Dad's attorney called me a few weeks after the funeral to discuss his will. I was hoping for a tiny inheritance or a memento, but nothing more. However, I was taken aback when I met with the attorney. Dad had bequeathed the house, his savings, and his assets to me. Rachel and Karen received nothing. Given how little his wife and youngest daughter cared for him, I could only imagine how much anguish Dad must have been going through in his last months. He expressed his appreciation for everything I'd done for him by leaving everything to me. It caused a firestorm, though. When Karen and Rachel learned, they were furious. In fact, Rachel yelled at the attorney, stating that she could never be subjected to this treatment by her father. Karen called and insisted that I give them a piece of the inheritance. I declined. For the sake of my sanity, I disconnected from Rachel and Karen. Their sense of entitlement was draining. I eventually met my husband after relocating to the city where I was employed and concentrating on starting again. We relocated abroad for his work, got married, and had a baby. To be honest, I didn't feel the need to tell Karen or Rachel about it because it was a new beginning. After a few years, I became a mother to my daughter. Karen appeared at my place out of the blue. It was unexpected to see her at my door as I hadn't spoken to her in years. She appeared more worn out and less put together. She sobbed, expressed regret, and expressed her want to be involved in my daughter's life. She even acknowledged that she felt bad about the way she raised me. She said she just wanted to make amends because she had been living with remorse ever since Dad died. Although I must admit that I didn't trust her, I chose to give her a chance. It was all right for a time. Karen would occasionally send gifts and make video calls to see how my daughter was doing. For once it felt normal. Then, predictably, the hints began. I thought it would go away, so I disregarded Karen when she casually said how hard life had been for her since I took everything, or how she was having financial difficulties. Karen gave me a call around a month ago. The fact that she seemed enthusiastic made me uneasy right away because Karen doesn't call unless she needs something. She struck up a discussion by inquiring about my spouse and daughter, which was already strange. Then she revealed the shocking news that Rachel was getting married once more. As you recall, Rachel's first marriage ended almost a year later. She never really put her life back on track after moving back in with Karen. Rachel and I hadn't spoken for more than 10 years, so this news was unexpected. Karen talked endlessly on Rachel's significance of this wedding, how it was a new beginning for her, and how pleased the family would be. I congratulated her, was courteous, and assumed that was the end of it. But obviously not. Karen went on to say something like, "You know, Rachel has had a really difficult time organizing this wedding within her budget. After everything she's been through, she deserves a lovely day." I knew where this was going, so I said nothing. "I was hoping you could help out with the expenses," she finally added. "Considering everything your father left you, it's the least you can do." I was astounded. To begin with, Rachel and I don't even communicate. Second, what level of entitlement is required to demand payment from someone who isn't even invited to the wedding? Indeed, Karen made it apparent that I was not invited. "Oh, we assumed you wouldn't want to travel with a baby, but of course you're welcome to come," Karen said in an attempt to backtrack when I brought this up. "Your sister is getting married, so you don't need an invitation." I bluntly told her no. I had nothing to pay for. She attempted to place the blame on me by claiming that I had an obligation to assist Rachel as the older sister. She also mentioned Dad's wealth, saying that while Rachel was struggling, I was hoarding the family fortune. I informed her that Rachel and I were not romantically involved and advised her to get in touch with Rachel directly if she needed assistance. Rachel, predictably, never did. Karen didn't accept rejection. She kept bringing up the same point in her voicemails and texts over the course of the following few weeks. I was disappointing Rachel, I was self-centered, and I didn't care about my family. "If you don't help, it will ruin Rachel's big day and everyone will know it's your fault," she even stated. The problem is that Rachel and Karen were behaving as though I owed them money. But when I needed assistance, where were they? I was the one who put everything on hold to take care of Dad while he was ill. While everybody continued living their lives, I was the one who remained by his side. And now they wanted me to come through and save the day after years of silence? Not at all. Karen made matters worse by asserting that Rachel had already reserved the space and paid deposits for musicians, caterers, and decorations. Since the invitations had already been sent, she claimed that canceling everything would make the family look foolish. If they couldn't afford it, how did they plan all of this? I asked her. What did she say? "You were what we needed." That was the last straw. I informed Karen that because I wasn't providing them any money, she could solve the problem on her own. She broke down in tears and threatened to cut me out of her life if I didn't help. "You already treated me like I didn't exist," I responded, laughing. What makes a difference? I hung up and blocked her after that. Although he cautioned that there would be criticism from extended family, my husband supported my choice. He was correct. Some family members contacted me and said that since family is family, I should be the bigger person and lend a hand. However, where was all of this concern when Karen and Rachel were treating me like trash? I disregarded them and refused to back down. I haven't replied, and to be honest, I don't intend to, but Karen left me a voicemail with the words, "If you can live with ruining your sister's wedding, then I guess you're not the person I thought you were. Too much of my life has been devoted to going above and beyond for folks who don't value it. I'm finished." I reached my breaking point after the wedding drama. In the house Dad left me, Karen and Rachel had been living rent-free for more than a decade. A part of me believed that especially after Dad's passing, it would be simpler to avoid the drama of evicting them. But as time went on, I came to see that they were not appreciative of me, did not respect me, and had no plans to ever be respectable. Let's go back a little. Karen and Rachel were furious that Dad left everything to me when his will was read. Karen said that because she had lived there for many years, it was her house. Rachel screamed about how unjust it was during her tantrum. In actuality though, neither of them was worthy of a dime. When they couldn't even bother to come up most of the time, Dad left me the house because he could see how much I cared for him in his last months. "I see you, and I appreciate you," was how he expressed his gratitude. I allowed them to remain in the house even after I inherited everything. I had the hope that they might change. However, Karen never once offered to pay me rent and instead rented out one of the rooms to pay for her own costs, acting as though the house was hers. I was treated like a villain by Rachel, who told the rest of the family that I had tricked Dad into excluding her from the will. They didn't try to patch things up between them. I finally came to the conclusion that enough was enough. I needed to reclaim what was properly mine since they had stayed too long. "I was hoping you could help out with the expenses," she finally added. "Considering everything your father left you, it's the least you can do." I was astounded. I don't even speak to Rachel, to start. Second, what level of entitlement is required to demand payment from someone who isn't even invited to the wedding? Indeed, Karen made it apparent that I was not invited. "Oh, we assumed you wouldn't want to travel with a baby, but of course, you're welcome to come," Karen said in an attempt to retract her statement when I brought this up. "Your sister is getting married, so you don't need an invitation." I bluntly told her no, I had nothing to pay for. She attempted to place the blame on me by claiming that I had an obligation to assist Rachel as the older sister. She also mentioned Dad's wealth, saying that while Rachel was struggling, I was hoarding the family fortune. I informed her that Rachel and I were not romantically involved and advised her to get in touch with Rachel directly if she needed assistance. Rachel, predictably, never did. Karen didn't accept rejection. She kept bringing up the same point in her voicemails and texts over the course of the following few weeks. I was disappointing Rachel, I was self-centered, and I didn't care about my family. "If you don't help, it will ruin Rachel's big day and everyone will know it's your fault," she even stated. The problem is that Rachel and Karen behaved as though I owed them money. But when I needed assistance, where were they? I was the one who put everything on hold to take care of Dad while he was ill. While everybody continued living their lives, I was the one who remained by his side. And now they wanted me to come through and save the day after years of silence? Not at all. Karen made matters worse by asserting that Rachel had already reserved the space and paid deposits for musicians, caterers, and decorations. Since the invitations had already been sent, she claimed that canceling everything would make the family look foolish. If they couldn't afford it, how did they plan all of this? I asked her. What did she say? "You were what we needed." That was the last straw. I informed Karen that because I wasn't providing them any money, she could solve the problem on her own. She broke down in tears and threatened to cut me out of her life if I didn't help. "You already treated me like I didn't exist," I responded, laughing. "What makes a difference?" I hung up and blocked her after that. Although he cautioned that there would be criticism from extended family, my husband supported my choice. He was correct. Some family members contacted me and said that since family is family, I should be the bigger person and lend a hand. However, where was all of this concern when Karen and Rachel were treating me like trash? I disregarded them and refused to back down. I haven't replied, and to be honest, I don't intend to, but Karen left me a voicemail with the words, "If you can live with ruining your sister's wedding, then I guess you're not the person I thought you were. Too much of my life has been devoted to going above and beyond for folks who don't value it. I'm finished." I reached my breaking point after the wedding drama. In the house Dad left me, Karen and Rachel had been living rent-free for more than a decade. A part of me believed that especially after Dad's passing, It would be simpler to avoid the drama of evicting them. But as time went on, I came to see that they were not appreciative of me, did not respect me, and had no plans to ever be respectable. Let's go back a little. Karen and Rachel were furious that Dad left everything to me when his will was read. Karen said that because she had lived there for many years, it was her house. Rachel screamed about how unjust it was during her tantrum. In actuality, though, neither of them was worthy of a dime. When they couldn't even bother to come up most of the time, Dad left me the house because he could see how much I cared for him in his last months. "I see you, and I appreciate you," was how he expressed his gratitude. I allowed them to remain in the house even after I inherited everything. I had the hope that they might change. However, Karen never once offered to pay me rent and instead rented out one of the rooms to pay for her own costs, acting as though the house was hers. I was treated like a villain by Rachel, who told the rest of the family that I had tricked Dad into excluding her from the will. They certainly enjoyed living in a house they didn't pay for, but they didn't try to patch things up. After Karen's absurd request that I cover Rachel's wedding costs and the constant attempts at manipulation, I finally had enough. I had an eviction notice prepared after I called my attorney. Karen went insane when she got it. "You can't evict me," she yelled when she called me. "I call this place home. I've spent 45 years here." I politely told her that she had 30 days to leave the house and that it was legally mine. Naturally, Rachel threw herself into the conflict. She accused me of being greedy and callous, calling me every possible insult in the book. "I just cared about Dad to get the inheritance," she said. It was absurd. I'm the terrible guy, even though she was the one who hardly ever saw Dad while he was dying. Karen did everything she could to get me to reconsider. She pretended to be tough at first, adding, "I dare you to kick me out." She then softened, saying that the house was all she had left and that she was too old to start again. "I'm not going anywhere." As if it wasn't the place I should have been collecting rent on for years, she even sobbed about how she had been renting out a room to make ends meet. It didn't work. Her attempt to guilt-trip me by asking, "What would your dad think if he saw you throwing your mother out on the street?" was the last straw. "Dad left me the house for a reason," I explained to her. "Perhaps he would still be alive if you had given him even half the attention you gave to spa sessions." I realized that was harsh, but I had had enough of sugarcoating things. Karen had to deal with the repercussions of her decisions. The eviction wasn't warmly received by Rachel either. She made a huge deal out of telling Karen to temporarily move in with her. She boasted to every one of her relatives over the phone that she was supporting Karen and that she didn't require anything from me. She seemed to want a round of applause for performing the absolute minimum, and it was all very performative. On the 26th day of the 30-day notice period, Karen left. I didn't even make an effort to appear. To oversee the transition, I engaged a property manager. I had the house refurbished and cleaned after it was vacant. I made the trusting decision to rent it to the brother of a family friend. Knowing that the house would eventually be occupied by individuals who valued it was a pleasant feeling. In the meantime, because I wouldn't pay, Rachel's elaborate wedding plans fell through. She was forced to move from an elegant lakefront location to a municipal hall. It seems that this embarrassed a number of people in their social circle, and Rachel's fiancé wasn't pleased either. He didn't even want a large wedding, it turns out. Shortly after Karen moved in with Rachel, I began to hear rumors of trouble in paradise because Rachel had assured him she would find a way to pay for it, which was obviously code for "my sister will pay." Having his mother-in-law as a frequent visitor to the residence did not sit well with Rachel's husband. As usual, Karen felt compelled to interfere in their lives. She would make fun of Rachel's cooking, or remark on how Rachel's husband managed the house, and overall be a pain in the neck. Some family members have attempted to use guilt-tripping to get me to forgive Rachel and Karen. They insist that I should have allowed Karen to remain in the house and that I have gone too far. But to be honest, I don't give a damn. I don't care about these people's thoughts anymore because they remained silent when I was being tormented. Let's go on to the final update now. I believed that I would finally be at peace after Karen moved in with Rachel. I cut off most of the toxic relatives who tried to guilt-trip me into forgiving Karen and Rachel, rented out the house, and concentrated on my family. I must admit that I was relieved when I didn't hear from them for a time. Naturally, though, that didn't last. I received a contact from a mutual relative inquiring whether I had heard anything about Karen and Rachel's situation around 2 months after the eviction. I hadn't, and I wasn't sure I cared, to be honest. But I had to ask since I was so curious. They told me things that were both frustrating and, dare I say it, gratifying. Chris, Rachel's husband, apparently had enough of Karen's interference and issued Rachel a final ultimatum: either she leaves or I leave. Due to the wedding fiasco, Rachel was already at odds with him. Do you recall that she had promised him a lavish wedding, which I was supposed to pay for? Rachel felt ashamed in front of her friends and his family when they were forced to settle for a modest town hall ceremony when things didn't work out. There was a lot of friction in their relationship as a result of her disregarding Chris's warnings not to overextend financially. Things only got worse when Karen moved into their house. Chris's cuisine, his parenting skills, they have a toddler, and even his communication with Rachel were all criticized by Karen. Ironically, given her own financial mess, she would advise them on how to handle their money. For a while, Chris tried to put up with it, but after one very heated argument in which Karen accused him of not being man enough to care for his family, he told Rachel that it was either him or Karen. Rachel pleaded with him to change his mind, but he refused. The worst part is that Karen didn't go out in silence. She lost it when Rachel informed her of Chris's ultimatum. She also threatened to remove Rachel from her will, which was a pointless threat given that Karen had nothing to leave behind, and accused Rachel of abandoning her like everyone else. After they got into a heated dispute, Rachel, who was probably embarrassed and upset, advised Karen to work it out on her own. Where has Karen disappeared to? Not surprisingly, she made an attempt to get in touch with me. She asked me if I would think about allowing her to return to the house via email. Yes, an email, as I had blocked her on all other platforms. She wrote on how harsh life had been to her and how, as a mother, she had always tried her hardest. She even attempted to present it as a chance for us to mend and re-establish our bond. I didn't even think to answer. Her deceptive strategies were now just depressing. Karen attempted to use guilt tripping to persuade some extended family members to take her in after I failed to respond. The majority of them flatly refused, most likely due to their observation of her methods. A distant cousin consented to let Karen stay for a short while, but she was asked to leave after just 3 weeks. Evidently, the cousin had had enough of her persistent complaints and demanding demeanor. Rachel is currently coping with the consequences of her choices. Although Chris stayed with her, their relationship is apparently in very bad shape. Chris has been withdrawing both financially and emotionally as a result of the wedding costs, Karen's turmoil, and Rachel's inability to accept responsibility for anything. Rachel has been telling everyone that he, not her, is the issue, even though he even recommended couples counseling. According to what I've heard, Rachel has been complaining to her family about how unfair it is that Dad gave me everything. She said that none of this would have occurred if I had simply divided the inheritance. She intentionally omits the part where she and Karen treated me like a monster for caring about Dad and disregarded him in his last months. With them, it's always someone else's fault. I've been doing okay in spite of their turmoil. The best choice I've ever made was to lease out the house. The space is truly loved and respected by the renters, a lovely family. I now have financial stability and can invest in my daughter's future thanks to the rental income. My spouse and I are doing well in our jobs, and we have begun preparing for a long overdue family getaway. Regarding Karen and Rachel, they have already made their decisions and are now dealing with the fallout. Rachel is trapped in a marriage that is about to end, while Karen continues to move between relatives. I simply don't care about them anymore. I don't mean any harm. The most liberating thing of all has been realizing that their turmoil is no longer my problem. I appreciate you reading and all of your help along the process, Reddit. Thank you for everything, and be careful. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.